for today's proceedings, which is appreciating oversight institutions. Our session will be moderated by Honorable Antonia Araujo, the President of AOMA and Ombudsman for the Republic of Angola. We are going to start off with an introduction by our moderator, Honorable Araujo. Thank you. Since our Honorable will be presenting in Portuguese, we have the aid of headphones, where you'll get the translation regarding a presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, bonjour, bom dia, honoráveis provedores de justiça, mediadores, presidentes das Comissões de Direitos Humanos, caros participantes. Eu vou ser a moderadora do tema sobre a valorização das instituições do provedor de justiça. O meu nome, como disseram, portanto, é Antônia Florbela Araújo. Eu sou provedora de justiça da República de Angola, sou presidente da Associação dos Provedores de Justiça e Mediadores Africanos, já fui secretária do Presidente da República para os Assuntos Judiciais e Jurídicos, já fui provedora adjunta de Justiça, já fui presidente da rede CPLP dos Provedores de Justiça, fui diretora regional do IOI, fui diretora do Gabinete para Ação de Ações do Conselho de Ministros, assistente da Casa Civil do Presidente da República, e tenho licenciatura em Direito, um mestrado em Ciências Jurídicas Internacionais. Fui professora da Faculdade de Direito da Universidade Católica, da Universidade de Lusíada de Angola, assistente do professor França Vandone, que morreu há 2 meses, e fui membro de várias comissões. Tenho a carteira de advogada, mas com mandato suspenso, tendo em conta as funções que desempenho.
The functions that I'm doing, I'm not active, so I'm going to present the topics and I'm going to do.
Pelo primeiro tópico, que vai ser o provedor de justiça do Botsuana como uma instituição de confiança, partilha de boas práticas e lições aprendidas. O palestrante será o provedor de justiça do Botsuana e comissário para os direitos humanos, o Dr. Stefan Tirogossi. O segundo tópico será as instituições de supervisão com múltiplos mandatos, uma reflexão sobre os mandatos, efetividade e desafios. O palestrante será o Dr. Mathieu.
The speaker is going to be Mayan Umo, and also the President of the Commission of Human Rights, and also Ombudsman of the Republic of Tanzania, and also the third topic is going to be the mission of the public services as an institution of trust and within its mandate of supervision in times of change, and also the speaker is going to be Professor Somato, that is also the President of the Republic of South Africa, and the fourth topic is going to be the topic improving also the control and supervision within the law, and also share the experiences, and also the speaker, Dr. Kjov, that is from the Council of the Parliament. And the fifth topic is going to be the development of environment within the government and also within the experience. And also the speaker is going to be Dr. Isabella Machera, and also the head of the Department of Law or Commonwealth of Law. And sixth topic is going to be the development also for the effective supervision within the government and his experience within the court. And the speaker is going to be Dr. Sarah, and is president of the court in Botswana. And after presentation, I was going to start the first lecture, that is Ombudsman of Botswana, and also the Commission of Human Rights, that is going to talk about Ombudsman in Botswana as an institution of trust, sharing, and also the lessons learned, and is also going to present his biography. And kindly take the floor.
Good morning. Is this working? Good morning. So it's audible. I've been asked to make a presentation. I'm very bad at making presentations. I prefer to adopt the method by one Nigerian singer called Fela Kuti. Fela Kuti talks in his music. I don't know how to present to audiences. I prefer to chat with audiences. So let's start chatting. The topic that I've been asked to talk about is entitled Botswana Ombudsman as a Trusted Institution, Sharing Good Practices and Lessons in Effectiveness. The Office of the Ombudsman of Botswana. What institution is this? It was created by Act Cap 0212, 1995. And came into operation 2 years later. Now, one will say, why was it created in 1995? If you look at that same year, the organization now known as the Directorate on Corruption and Economic Crime was created by an act of parliament in 1994. Was it a mere coincidence? There is a proposition that it was not. Because between the period 1990 and 1994, there were serious concerns, allegations, and even findings about an emerging scourge of corruption in Botswana. Chasing with my laptop. This? Yes. The next one. Okay. I don't know how they expect me to use two laptops at the same time. Mr. Slab. There's a view that the creation of this institution, the Office of the Ombudsman, as well as the Directorate on Corruption and Economic Crime in 1994 was not a coincidence, because the background is that around that period, 1990 to 1994, the government of Botswana had established two commissions of inquiry. One was known as the Cabo Commission, and the other, the Christie Commission. The Cabo Commission specifically dealt with issues of massive plunder of tribal land in the outskirts of Gaborone, where politicians and land board officials plundered plowing fields belonging to individuals and sometimes laying fallow and belonging to the government, allocated themselves land in that area. Two cabinet ministers eventually lost or had to resign because they were implicated in the land plunder. The Christie Commission investigated a state-owned enterprise, the Botswana Housing Corporation, which was responsible for providing affordable housing, particularly in the urban areas. It seemed that many tenders were awarded to contractors inappropriately. This was so traumatic to a country that had not experienced that level of corruption, and that led to the creation of these two agencies. But taking a step back, it has been noted by one Fombard, a researcher and a law lecturer at the time, that the ruling Botswana Democratic Party in 1974 had considered creating an office of ombudsman, had actually included in their political manifesto for the 1974 elections, but never actualized that through the 70s, the 80s, until the trauma of the Christie and Cabo commissions. The Ombudsman Act, therefore, was passed in 1995 and amended in 2021 to reconfigure the mandate and other issues around it. Now, I'm going to talk about, go a step back, what I'm going to call the Fombardian propositions. And these were several. The first proposition that Fombard noted in his research was that Botswana was a fairly late entrant into what he called the Ombudsman Club. But also noted that over the 3 decades preceding the establishment of the Office of the Ombudsman, because Botswana had transitioned from a fairly, well, okay, not even fairly, from a terribly poor country to a middle-class status by the late 80s, late 90s. Corruption had been very low level, almost non-existent, because of course there was nothing to steal at the time. But as soon as the money started flowing in, people started digging their fingers into the public purse. The civil service, because it served, was very competent and very efficient, paying attention to detail, discipline, and dedication. And I think the reference to discipline and dedication would matter in this context. They didn't want to do anything wrong. or they didn't get to do anything wrong until the economic opportunities that were now presented by Diamond Money, gearing up a platform for plunder and opportunity for corruption and influence peddling. What Fombat knows is that it was such a shock to the system that corruption had to be acknowledged, was publicly acknowledged, and the commissions of inquiry were appointed, and as I said, leading to the two bodies I've referred to. These scandals around the Cabo and exposed by the Cabo and Christie commissions pressurized the government, of course, to then establish the institutions which could counter the plunder and abuse of public resources. Hence, the establishment of those two. Now, let's talk about trusted institutions. And I'm going to take the word trust in its simplest form. So trust, for the purpose of this discussion, means trust, as you and I know it. Nothing complex. And that when we talk about institutions in this regard, we're going to be talking about government institutions. There is a proposition that government institutions can make themselves trusted or distrusted. In the words of Hardin, the stance of citizens towards government could, in principle, be one of trust, distrust, or lack of both. So institutions can choose to be trusted or opt not to be trusted. But that I'm going to propose that for the trust to evolve, there must be certain normative values that exist to determine which way the trust is going. Is it going to be trust or lack of trust? I will propose that the first normative value is that trust in public institutions is indispensable for the smooth functioning of society. When citizens don't trust public institutions, they will run riot, essentially. They will do as they please. I will propose that there is a normative value number 2, that public institutions may secure trust by delivering on commitments. So if they don't deliver, it lays the ground for corruption. It lays the ground for abuse. The third proposition is that most of you know it: power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And then the fourth value is that, arising out of the assertion that power corrupts, that unfettered power is fertile ground for irrational and self-centered decision-making. So, on this last proposition, I will take you to a provision in the Ombudsman's Act that reads as follows, and I think I can read it from the top of my head. Any decision by the Ombudsman shall not be challenged by any person, authority, or in any court. Unfettered power that could lead the Ombudsman to do as he pleases within the discharge of his mandate. Now, what does the public think about the office of the Ombudsman? If you look at the newspapers, the media, and other utterances by politicians and members of the public, The view is that the office of the ombudsman is a toothless bulldog. Because remember, if you look at the Act, ombudsman can only issue recommendations. So unlike courts, we don't issue orders, we don't issue instructions, but only recommendations to be complied with by government departments. Secondly, that because we issue recommendations, they lack power of enforcement. It's a recommendation, it's not a court order. So essentially, it's unenforceable as a strict court order would be. The biggest weapon that we have as Office of the Ombudsman is that we are required to lay reports before Parliament, or in the event of intransigent behavior by any agency failing to comply with recommendations, to also issue special reports. Reports are laid before Parliament, but for me the big issue is the reports are never considered. So you lay a report before Parliament, the parliamentarians read it, then they go to what in Botswana we call the freedom squares. That is where everything is set free for all. So they will call the ombudsman office a toothless bulldog, or this or that type of dog. Which means that for the public authorities that have been put in a bad light before the office of the by the office of the ombudsman, parliamentarians will not care. They will not call on the offending agency to do good what needs to be done. And because we largely issue recommendations, ministries, departments, and agencies tend to take their time to comply with or implement recommendations. So because of those reasons, my view is that people consider the office of the ombudsman the so-called toothless bulldog. I don't think I'm as ugly as a bulldog. So what measures do we have in place? We believe that to make the office more effective, we need to have more legal investigators. We need to have more consultations on issues with heads of departments and accounting officers, develop a case book, have seminars with various agencies, as well as digitization. So I'm going to delve into each one of those separately. Engagement with accounting officers. The accounting officers are what the Ombudsman Act call the principal officers. These are officers, executive officers of respective agencies. So it will be the permanent secretary in the event of a ministry. Others call it Director General. It will be the CEO of a public corporation. It will be the various executive officers of other institutions of government. We need to have an effective communication channel between the office of the Ombudsman and the MDAs. This becomes an essential tool for ease of resolution and implementation of recommendations. We need to have scheduled meetings with updates and clear guidelines for addressing complaints. And only when you do that, do you actually see the executive officers referred to ticking off the list of cases presented one by one and assuring compliance with recommendations. The big challenge is that when they have the recommendations, they take their own sweet time to comply with such. So for instance, if it's a recommendation to pay compensation, they will argue that for this financial year, we have not budgeted for the compensation. So we'll see you the next financial year. The turnaround time for the Office of the Ombudsman is that any complaint should be resolved within 5 months. But only about 41% of those are resolved within that period. The rest become carryovers into a backlog or even into an emerging financial year. And then the level of intransigence is amazing. I recently engaged with one land authority on a case that was presented in 2021, so that's about almost 3 years ago, where the complainant had their land repossessed by the land board to cater for construction of land, or of a road. This was all 40 hectares of land that was repossessed. The complainant was not compensated either by way of money or issuance of a new farming field. In the period of 3 years, the complainant died without the decision being complied with, because the land board would say, this is not our problem, it's the problem of the roads department. The road department would say, no, we did not take away the land, we are giving the land. That is the level of intransigence that you meet when you talk to public authorities. And without engaging with the authorities, you will not get a resolution or implementation of recommendations. So the issue around investigators, I think it's important to ensure that your investigators, your investigation team has adequate numbers. During any year, you find that an investigator has 30 to 40 cases that they have to deal with. In addition to those cases, they have to deal with what they call incidents. That is, complaints that are almost resolved on the spot. But these normally take a day or two to complete. So don't mature into proper cases. Technically, it means that an officer could have a new case every week whilst dealing with cases that have already accumulated on their desk. But also, in addition to dealing with cases, investigators also have to double up as public education officers. They travel up and down the country, carrying out activities of public education, attending meetings, etc. So the fewer numbers you have, the more the burden that each investigator has to deal with. And then when you approach government for additional funding for manpower, obviously the government will tell you that we don't have money to fund additional hands. So what have we done? We have developed a case book. We issued our first case book this year. The case book covers the kind of cases that the Office of the Ombudsman deals with. So we have our first volume. Resources permitting, time permitting, we should issue the next one and then the next one. But this is a case book that covers a span of 20 years. But in any given year, we have 1,200 cases. So with resources, additional hands to prepare the cases, we should be getting into developing the next case book. What is the value of the case book? The case book will capture repeated behavior, but it will also capture decisions and recommendations that have been made by the Ombudsman and serves as a guide to decision makers as to how to handle particular cases. We believe that using such a case book should be able to guide your counterparts in government. But of course, it's a tiresome, expensive exercise. And you can only do that when you have a dedicated research office to sift through the cases, develop the facts and the decisions, and then compiling and printing and everything. The next other avenue that we have looked at is to continuously engage in public education and seminars. We conduct the seminars on best administrative practices. We do help on interpretation of regulations and laws, even though sometimes we clash with the government legal advisors on what the understanding of the law is. Ms. Rosenkhan, your people, or this Mr. Molodi's people, the government attorney. Yeah, we have confrontation usually with the government attorney on what we think the appropriate interpretation is. He advises his clients to go that way. We tell that his clients to go that way. Because typically as lawyers, we'll have a different view of what we think the law is. But I think both us and the Office of the Attorney General should be guided by achieving the best result in the administration of public affairs. We also have discussions on implementation of administrative law cases determined by courts. One of the biggest concerns is that when courts from time to time make decisions on administrative law issues, government is very slow to implement those determinations by court. So the court will say, in this situation, this is what should have been done. But because it is Mr. X who went to court, they will say that, tongue-in-cheek, deliberately, that decision only applies to Mr. X. And only it takes a bit of time then to persuade government that, in fact, that is what the law is. It's not an order in respect of X, but it's a determination of what the law is, the interpretation of the statutes, and how it should be implemented. I recently had an engagement with a member of the members of the LGBT communities around an issue affecting or relating to issues of homosexuality. Until quite recently, homosexuality was a crime in Botswana. The highest court has said that the public has no business in wanting to know what two individuals do behind the closed doors. But the concern from the LGBT community is that the law is still in the statute book. It has not been deleted. And therefore, they still get harassed by the police. They still get harassed in public places when they are innocently holding hands. So for them, the issue is that because the law was declared unconstitutional, they still get this unfair treatment. So the slowness, Mrs. Rosenkhan, with your clients not removing that provision from the penal code, is to actually illegally empower the police to harass people who engage in homosexual behavior. And that is just one of the ways that, because the government is slow to implement a court decision, then that level of slowness causes a discomfort. They raised another issue with me, the one of gender markers. So the Botswana National ID has a binary gender marker. It sees you either as male or female. And I think the court has pronounced in respect of one person that the person was entitled to, it's the third or neutral gender marker. So for those that do not fall in the normal binary, whether physically or psychologically, they find themselves stranded in no man's land because they are put on a binary gender marker to which they feel they don't belong. So the attitude of the government being that the particular determination by court related to the applicant and not to others in her place, she having naturally transited from being a him to a her. So we then do conduct seminars around such issues, implementation of court orders to help government departments do things as per court orders. But they take their time, or they argue that it is not the business of X, it was the business of Y who took us to court. So these are the kind of issues that when people appear before the office of the Ombudsman and complain about non-implementation of even court orders by government, they then tend to lose trust. But we have, as I've said, put in those measures to try to garner more compliance and therefore also create a trust in the public that the Ombudsman is worth the while approaching for redress. And then on an operational basis, one of the challenges that we have is that we have weaknesses around, we notice that we have weaknesses around our record system, especially the generation of complaint files. Over the past 3 years, we engaged in a digitization project supported by government together with other like-minded departments. Our digitized record management system is operational, but the most appealing aspect of that is that once it is fully operational, a member of the public should be able to generate a complaint file through either using a WhatsApp or an SMS or any other e-platform in due course. We are hoping that this portal will be available in a few months as part of the computerized file management system, and that the slowness of locating files, generating files will be abated. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope I have discharged sufficient pearls of wisdom, knowledge, and experience. Thank you. So you're chasing me away.
Thank you, Advocate Pirakosi, for that excellent presentation. And we'll move on to our next topic, which will be on oversight with multiple mandate, reflections on roles, effectiveness, and challenges. Before our next speaker, I would like to make a small announcement. The moderator has requested that those with questions and comments should keep them, and that then they will make those after the rest of the presentations. She has decided on this in the interest of time because we are running behind time.
Depois de ouvirmos a brilhante apresentação do provedor de Botsuana, que tal como nos nossos países, também o provedor é como um cão de guarda, porque não tem caráter decisório.
Because they cannot
Temos que
make
pensar que
decisions.
ainda temos de trabalhar muito.
We still have a long way to
Porque
go
também
in
as
this
recomendações
regard.
que fizemos aos
And
governos
because we,
nem sempre
most of the recommendations that
atendidas, os nossos relatórios, como disse,
as you well said, are submitted to the National Assembly, but they are shelved. Most of our recommendations are left out, are not implemented.
quando detectamos
And when we detect corruption cases, this is a huge problem. Therefore, now we are now going to give the floor to the second presenter, which is the Ombudsman. He's going to talk about, he is the President of the Commission of Human Rights and Good Governance of the United Republic of Tanzania. He's going to talk about oversight with multiple mandate, reflections on roles, effectiveness, and challenges. Taking into consideration that we are lagging behind, I would like to kindly request that the presenters make their presentations in no more than 20 minutes, in less than 20 minutes. Please, President of the Commission of Human Rights and Good Governance of the Republic of Tanzania, please come to the podium so that you can make your presentation in no more than 20 minutes.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. With a time constraint, I will try to my level best to go through the relevant parts, and I might be skipping some of these parts. I will skip the introductory part because it goes back to the establishment of the Ombudsman institutions. But I just wanted to point out that it is connected to our establishment of our Ombudsman in Tanzania. One thing I would like to say about this is that I would like to give you a brief account of the historical background of our commission. Our commission started sometime in 1965 when an institution named the Permanent Commission of Inquiry was established, and it was through the interim constitution of the United Republic of Tanzania, which followed the union between the former Republic of Tanganyika and the People's Republic of Zanzibar. In 1996, the Parliament enacted a law to operationalize the functions of the Commission. In spite of the name, essentially it worked as an ombudsman institution under the President's office with the mandate to receive complaints from public, investigate and seek redress on matters of maladministration, abuse of office, mismanagement, and omissions committed by the government, party, and other officers in the public service. The PCE reported to the President about the malfunctions. The President was left with the power to take action against an officer to whom an investigation has been decided against him or her. It was designed to function as a mechanism by which citizens of the United Republic of Tanzania could protect themselves from the abuse of government power. In year 2000, the Constitution of the United Republic of Tanzania of 1977 was amended, and the PCE office was abolished and replaced by the Commission for Human Rights and Good Governance, which took over its functions. Apart from assuming the functions of the PCE, the newly established institution also was mandated to work as a human rights institution, and therefore was assigned a dual mandate. The Commission no longer reports to the President, rather to the Parliament. I would like to address those functions of this Commission. The first one is to promote and protect human rights and duties to the public. Secondly, to receive complaints in relation to violation of human rights in general. Thirdly, to conduct inquiry on matters relating to infringement of human rights and violation of principles of good governance. Fourth, to conduct research, impart or disseminate the public countrywide education in respect of human rights and good governance issues. Fifth, if necessary, sometimes to institute proceedings in court in order to prevent violation of human rights or to restore a right that was caused by that infringement of human rights or violation of principles of good governance. And the other function is to inquire into the conduct of any person or any institution concerned in relation to the ordinary performance of his duties or functions or abuse of authority of his office. For the interest of time, I will leave the other functions and go to the other part of my presentation. I would like to say that at this juncture, it is worth to note that at the time our commission was established, it was influenced by the famous Paris Principles of 1993. In 2019, the Venice Commission encouraged the creation and strengthening of the Ombudsman institutions, emphasizing its key role in the protection of human rights by contributing to the dissemination of an administrative culture that encourages the protection of human rights. In that regard, the Venice Commission drafted the Venice Principles for the Protection and Promotion of Ombudsman Institutions. The principles were adopted by the United Nations General Assembly on 16th December 2020. The principles were meant to consolidate and empower ombudsman institutions, which play a crucial role in strengthening democracy, the rule of law, good governance, and the protection and promotion of human rights and fundamental freedoms. The principles also invite ombudsman institutions to observe relevant international instruments, including the Paris Principles. The Commission, our Commission, also follows squarely the recently developed Venice Principles. Now I'd like to address the issue relating to effectiveness of the roles. The due mandate role of our Commission, which started in 2001, proved to be a success to a greater extent because although the two institutions evolved from different historical backgrounds, they serve almost the same purpose, both being intended to check malfunction on administrative actions of governments which affects the rights of individuals and the public at large. In operation, the Commission observes both the Paris Principles and the Venice Principles. Looking into the two instruments, the establishment of the two respective institutions and the modus operandi is almost similar. Currently, the Commission have power to receive and investigate complaints about human rights violations and a breach of good governance principles. The Commission have jurisdiction both over private and public complaints. In private complaints, is a small number of them because the nature of the institution requires us to deal more with public complaints. One of the notable facts which gives credence to the dual function of the Commission is that when a government official abuses power or omits to do an act which is aligned to his or her power to accomplish, in many cases, these acts end up in violation of human rights. Therefore, when inquiring or investigating malfunctions, one cannot avoid to do same on human rights violations. The importance of dual function is that as long as the two functions addresses cross-cutting issues, it curtails duplicity of a national institution which does almost the same work. Moreover, this also saves time and minimizes the use of resources, especially in institutions established in developing countries which, in some occasions, have both budget constraints and lack of human resource. Our observation is that in conducting investigations, it is possible to make findings both about human rights violations and a breach of principles of good governance in the same process. Therefore, instead of preparing two different reports, the findings and recommendations are made in the same report. Not only that, but also with current mandate, the Commission reports to the Parliament. The Commission is easily accessible in many ways. A complainant can lodge a complaint through an email, a phone, by writing a letter, and also can make physical visits to the Commission's offices. The complaints are lodged without prescription of any fee. Likewise, the Commission can launch investigations suo motu after getting information from the media and other people. Now let me address the challenges that we are facing. After the establishment of the Commission in the year 2000, the office was moved from the President's office to the Ministry of Constitutional and Legal Affairs as a line ministry on policy issues. One of the most challenging aspects is that this shift from the President's office changed the attitude of some public officials who before that feared the Permanent Commission of Inquiry because it reported its findings directly to the President, who had the power to impose punishments. The current law requires the Commission to send its annual reports to the Parliament through the Minister of Constitutional and Legal Affairs. The Ministry has been as well a hurdle in many cases because instead of sending the reports in accordance with the law, sometimes they keep the reports for longer periods. This has caused to a greater extent failure by the public to know the activities conducted by the Commission in time. Further to that, after the Commission's service for over 20 years, still there are some government officials who do not believe in the dual function of the Commission. There is still belief by some of them that the two institutions cannot be served under the same roof as they are institutions of different functions. Furthermore, by the name of the Commission carrying a generic phrase, human rights, some of the government officials even lambast the Commission's staff being activists, forgetting that even without the words being in the name of the Commission, still an ombudsman institution can deal with human rights issues. Another challenge is that while the Commission's functions and powers are provided under the Constitution, the law establishing the Commission and regulations, yet some people, including members of Parliament, do not know that the Commission is working within the prescribed jurisdiction by the Constitution and the Commission's law. They even condemn the Commission for not taking action against matters beyond its powers. The Commission also faces financial constraints as usual. Although the government has been increasing the budget every financial year, the funds are not sufficient to conduct all planned activities. Also, the Commission is faced with a limited number of staff. To overcome some of the challenges, the Commission has been taking steps to conduct public awareness campaigns to both government officials and the public at large to make them understand understand the advantages of having the type of institution that we have. Members of the Commission make regular visits to senior government officials to encourage them to support the work of the Commission. In conclusion, I would like to say at this end that it is important to say that the challenges faced by the Commission, enormous achievements have been obtained. Our belief is that the Commission has increasingly become more popular than ever and well known to the ordinary people because it is capable of communicating with the public through media and outreach programs. With this presentation, then this comes to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. Can I remove this? Can you remove this?
Yeah,
Okay. I would like to take the.
yeah, you can tell them.
Okay.
So these are not yours.
It's not like.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Honorable.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Moaimu, for that presentation. Our next topic of discussion will be on the Public Service Commission as a trusted institution, reflections on its oversight role and efficacy in the changing times.
After we listen to the brilliant intervention of the Commission, the chairperson of Rights and Government.
Acontece em todos os países em via de desenvolvimento, como são os nossos, onde os recursos financeiros são escassos e não se pode cumprir cabalmente, geralmente, os nossos planos de atividade. Há instituições que ainda não acreditam nas comissões de direitos humanos e de boa governação, embora estejam, portanto, plasmados na Constituição, como também é o caso de Angola, censuram as atividades, muitas vezes fazem resistência às inspeções a que são sujeitos, mesmo constando do Estatuto que nem é necessário avisar para fazer inspeções, mas de uma forma geral, por questões de ética até avisamos. E o problema da falta dos funcionários,
That there's not enough staff, that some of the ombudsman's officers or even commissions of human rights don't have enough. But we need to continue to pressurize our governments to give more importance also for the execution for these measures, so that, especially also with human rights, so that there is more inspectors and also experts that can deal with the cases. These are the challenges that we face. And so now we're going to give opportunity to the topic, which is the Public Service Commission as a trusted institution and reflections on its oversight role and efficacy in changing times. And the speaker is going to be the Honorable Professor Somadoda Fikeni, which is the chairman of the Public Service Commission of Pretoria in South Africa. Kindly, Professor, that is the chairman of the Public Service Commission of Pretoria, kindly, you can take the floor, and thank you very much.
Program Director, the distinguished audience, and particular recognition of our host, which is Botswana, that we congratulate for hosting this prestigious second International Ombuds Expo. Good morning. Is it still morning, afternoon? Good afternoon, boa tarde, dumelang. Mine is just to highlight a few things on the constitutional bodies of South Africa, and with some emphasis on the institution I'm chairing, the Public Service Commission, and also hoping that we can extract some lessons out of this particular case. The accountability and oversight ecosystem is at the very heart of ensuring effective and accountable governance that impacts positively on people's lives. But there are profound blind spots and challenges that I will also highlight along the way. The constitutional bodies in the South African Constitution are mainly constituted by those bodies in Chapter 9 of the Constitution. That will be your Public Protector, your Auditor General, your Independent Electoral Commission, your Human Rights Commission, and your Cultural Rights Commission, your Gender Commission, and so forth. And in Chapter 10, of course, the Public Service Commission. In Chapter 13, you will have the Financial and Fiscal Commission. These bodies were designed to be largely insulated and autonomous from government departments. They are, in essence, the extended arms of Parliament in terms of oversight, in terms of accountability ecosystem. But the surveys which have shown the South African, and across the world, by the way, have shown that over time, the Afrobarometer and several other studies, there is a declining trust of government. There is a declining trust of public institutions. And now that particular legitimacy crisis is beginning to encroach into the space of even constitutional bodies. And we ought to examine some of the reasons for this erosion of trust. But at a fundamental level, these trust levels declining are beginning to raise questions as to whether governments are doing what they are supposed to be doing, or whether they are simply following the procedural rules in a minimalist way. But I'll come back to that point. But what is most important in the South African example and examples elsewhere is that these constitutional bodies have tended to give legitimacy to some of the governments or departments or individuals, or have also led to their delegitimization by exposing some of the weaknesses which are there. But the moment you demonstrate as a constitutional body that you have potency, you have power to grant legitimacy or to withdraw legitimacy through your findings, then you attract political attention. Once you attract that political attention, naturally your very appointment has an element that takes you back to the political players, be it parliament, be it president, be it minister. In our case, generally the population did not know that there was something called the public protector. And one day, the public protector made findings against the president and the government. And the president tried to resist. The matter was taken to the Constitutional Court, and the Constitutional Court said the recommendations or the findings cannot be ignored. From that moment onwards, the political players realized how potent this particular institution was. And the next appointment of the public protector became a political fist, wherein now they scrambled to control the process. So that's the first lesson to say, once you become effective in your job, you naturally will attract an unnecessary attraction of political players who may want to influence, who may want to direct, who may want to interfere into the space. And you become the victim of your own success. So that's the first thing. And that is the case not only with the public protector, it has been the case with the independent electoral commissions. Because they give legitimacy, because they make that determination of who is the next government, the contestation as to who do you get in as the chairperson, who can you work with, and so forth becomes a problem. And all that because you have become important, effective, and impactful. So that's the one challenge that we often face. But the second part is the fact that government departments and political players tend to resist any effort to give full autonomy to these bodies. Whether through the budgetary processes, the funding appropriation processes, they will find reason to say, yes, you can be free, but we can't give you full freedom. And that is not only with the constitutional bodies, by the way, even the judiciary itself. You might have been following discourse in South Africa where the judiciary says, we have 3 branches of government. We are one of those branches. Why are we still dependent on a government department for our appropriations, for our appointments, when in fact we ought to be having that kind of autonomy? And at times you'll find that this issue of resources, this issue of approvals, up to a minute detail at times, the approval to attend a conference like this one, to say, by holding some of these strings, we will beat you and shape you into a particular line of compliance. So that is one other challenge that normally comes. The other one is the one of how do we account to Parliament. The Public Service Commission of South Africa is meant to oversee the performance of all government departments as an oversight institution and report to Parliament and interface with the ministers. But you find that the alignment with parliamentary processes is the one that is a big challenge, because you are then directed to go to this one portfolio, which is a public service and administration portfolio committee. Even if you are reporting on a matter that is related to health, that is related to defense, that is related to police, and this particular committee is not equipped to deal with some of those issues. But I'll come back to some of those things. Whilst we're still dealing with these issues of institutional arrangement, I do think that the accountability and oversight institutions must also be mindful of the mega trends and the changes that are taking place that will shape the future of their work. And what are these key trends that we must be taking into account? The first one is your geopolitical global shifts, tensions, and volatility. You might think that this has nothing to do with me, but the reality is that when such shifts do take place, ultimately, they do impact on the very notion, the functionality, and the utility of the institutions. But at the same time, the politics that I was talking about do impact on your functionality. This year, we have 4.6 billion, more or less, people who are going on elections or have already done so. And the political temperature tend to be high, the contestations high, and I doubt any one of you will say if you are in a country with elections and campaigns, your work has not been impacted by that. Because at times, like the Public Service Commission, we realize that closer to elections, political party members tended to report many cases, and they tended to put pressure for us to resolve those in time for election campaign. At times, the uncertainties as to who you were going to be working with do come as a factor. And besides, as the geopolitical system changes, as countries realign, for example, if you move to BRICS, you'll find that the notion of a multi-party neoliberal system is being questioned as to whether a developmental state is more effective focusing on the first generation human rights or second generation human rights, whether the developmental outcomes depend on the procedural aspects of the institutional arrangement. Those debates are beginning to come up when they say Brazil under Silva da Lula was able to lift out 70 million people out of poverty through his social democratic system. They say China was able to lift out 700 million people out of poverty, and they begin to ask the questions as to whether these constitutional bodies should play a minimalist role of saying we are just monitoring cases as they come, or a developmental role to say, what do we observe out of a pattern of complaints that come to us so that we can recommend policy reforms instead of dealing with case by case. In these mega trends, we do have climate change, global warming, environmental crisis, which has led to the frequency of disasters increasing. And we ought to be asking ourselves, how will this impact on the nature of complaints that come to us? Or how do we advise on the design of disaster-resilient institutions? Because that won't come and not impact on the work we do. Of course, in one of your sessions, you do have the AI or artificial intelligence-driven digital revolution and the role of oversight institutions. In future, it should be possible that you will have a case of somebody who is charged of having said something which was posted in the social media or having done something, and it looks at face value so authentic until such time that you realize it's deep fake. Are these institutions equipped to anticipate those, to even prepare the policies and adjust them to those? And of course, the growing crisis level of global and intrastate inequalities, intergenerational poverty, youth unemployment, does have an impact on the work we do. And I would assume that even in the different sectoral ombuds, that too will have its own impact. The issue of migration, immigration, global crisis, the issue of the collapse of family and the related social pathologies, how do they impact on the work that we do? They might look so remote until we bring them closer and we look very closely at them. Mindful of time, let me quickly run through the next few items. The biggest challenge that we have faced in South Africa, and I guess elsewhere as well, is the lack of coordination amongst oversight and accountability bodies. Where as a country you say we have limited resources, and yet you find different institutions doing the same work, and I think my colleague from Tanzania did allude to that, duplicating the work. Let me give you a case. We recently had a disaster of floods in Durban, in the city of Durban, in one of our provinces. And we were told by the receiving departments that we are now suffering from an oversight fatigue or saturation. Why? Because national parliament committees descended on that. They demanded officials to be on standby, write a report. Human Rights Commission went down to do the same oversight work. Public Service Commission went to do the same work. Provincial committees came to do the same work. AG came to do the same work. They are part of the same government in a unitary system. And now people had to choose between being in the field, assisting people who were suffering from floods, or to be in the office so that you avoid risking audit findings or being reprimanded in Parliament. That's why we are beginning to have in the Forum of Institutions Supporting Democracy a discussion to say how can we combine, and if one institution is there, we simply support it, we share reports and so forth, so that we don't have this oversight fatigue. Because the aim of oversight and accountability is not an end in itself, it should be an enabler. Of course, I've spoken about the minimalist approach in some of our work. But what I want to end by highlighting is the fact that we realized as the Public Service Commission, instead of receiving this grievance and receiving that grievance, instead of receiving reprimand from the Commission of Inquiry into the State Capture or Corruption, at the heart of everything we realized was the need for an overarching reform of the public service. Hence, we embarked on the professionalization of public service. Once you do that, once you do have an overhauled system that appoints people on the basis of competence instead of loyalty, once you insulate the professional bureaucracy from politics, you will then have a degree of stability where service delivery will be more effective, where corruption will be less, where policies will be implemented more effectively, more efficiently, where efficiency of the state could improve. But for that to take place, you need to look at the whole ecosystem, right from the training, education system to the appointment, recruitment system, talent management, to the filtering, integrity tests, performance assessment and consequence management, and how people are managed into the exit, and the retraining of people who are already in the system, because you might have the system there, but the wrong culture. How do you make people, as Alvin Toffler says, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be the people who cannot read and write or count, but it will be people who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. How do you make people unlearn what they've learned? And of course, one other thing is a shift from what we have embraced. This instrumental approach to compliance, malicious compliance, where people say, I'm doing a tick box to comply. Some of the seasoned public servants look so good. They have clean audits. They achieve all their targets, only to find that their work has no impact on the people on the ground. Why? It's because they've become fascinated with the instrument. They know how to even put targets so low. They look good on the paper, but people on the ground have absolutely no impression of what they are doing. It is for that reason that in South Africa, in the Buffalo City, one city that had so many problems, finally they managed to achieve a clean audit, an unqualified audit after so many years. When they were celebrating, trying to demand bonus, the public went out marching against clean audit because they said, this thing you are talking about in the papers, in your annual reports, have no relationship to our problems. So ultimately, as Ombuds community, how do we make sure that malicious compliance and minimalist approach to what we are doing is no longer in vogue? We start looking at the real impact, where when an annual report makes a praise song about performance, people on the ground could be feeling the same instead of feeling the very opposite. And of course, the preemptive stakeholder engagement has proven to be very effective for us as the Public Service Commission. Meeting with the Chief Justice, saying this is the work we're doing. This is how it relates to your work. Meeting with the Speaker of Parliament and the leaders of Parliament to say this is the work we're doing. Meeting with the Minister of Finance or Treasury to say, if you were to capacitate us, we could save you so many billions, so many hundreds of millions because of the following. Making a business case rather than simply saying we are doing our compliance. And of course, meeting with ordinary people, NGOs, traditional leaders, and labor unions, women's organizations, people with disability, to say, how do you see our work? How can we improve? Where are we falling short? And I want to end by saying it's also important in the era of mass digital communication to master the art of communicating your work, your mandate, and your achievements. Don't ignore spaces such as the social media and say, no, you'll give the intents to be there. Because those now are the ones that can make or break your reputation. They are the ones which are driving the headlines as to whether you are performing or not. So it is very important that crisis communication, ordinary communication, you are always on top of that particular game. So the Public Service Commission has also reached out to form forums and be part of global forums so that we can learn from the best. And that in itself is one of many things that we can look into. Thank you.
Thank you for that thought-provoking presentation, Professor Fikeni. We shall now move on to our next topic, which is enhancing legislative oversight and control, lessons and experiences.
Muito obrigada mais uma vez.
Much. Once again, Professor Fikeni, for this aula, Magna Aula, and I'd like to point out the saturation of oversight. The same applies to Angola. The oversight of different areas. The fact that we are acknowledging the recommendations. But there is a need to have more comprehensive reforms in the public service with more efficient and equitable policies to deal with education and employment and the management of the systems. The audit that was carried out, you talked about an audit that was made in a community in South Africa to enhance the livelihoods of those communities in the region, in that region. It is also important that social media should should be accessible to all citizens in all our countries. Now we can invite the fourth presenter, enhancing legislative oversight and control from the Parliamentary Council of Botswana. Your Excellency, Honorable Linchwe Dihowe from the Parliamentary Council, Botswana, may you kindly come to the podium to make your presentation. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, there was a problem in the Portuguese copy of the program.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. In the interest of time, I shall just quickly run through my presentation. And I believe I should not take more than 20 minutes because I've prepared heads and I shall quickly run through them. I'll be speaking to the topic which says enhancing oversight and control at the national level. My presentation, I'll look at the introduction, I'll look at some key strategic oversight institutions in Botswana, I'll look at functions of oversight role, relationship between oversight and politics, ultimate oversight authority in Botswana, risk created by political intolerance. Please pardon me if I may a little bit move into an area which would make maybe some of us uncomfortable, but you'll also pardon me because I work within the political space. Is it? I thought I was on it. Okay. Yeah, good. Thank you. Sorry about that. I think I've passed there. Yes. Oversight connotes overseeing something. It's more like a review and monitoring the public sector. It also entails representing the public. It ensures that the intended results are achieved. In the long run, achieving good value for money. Oversight role in Botswana. First, let us look at the ultimate authority insofar as oversight is concerned. Botswana Constitution establishes Parliament of Botswana. And you would agree with me that Parliament is the oversight ultimate in any country. Section 86 of the Constitution of the Republic of Botswana mandates the Parliament as the ultimate lawmaking body. It gives it the oversight role, and it also tasks it with the representation of the populace. Lawmaking entails or has in it the budget approval. In other words, budget approval is part of the lawmaking process. As the body which approves the budget, there is expectation that it has to ensure that money is used as intended. Parliament of Botswana is made of the President, the Speaker, 57 elected members, and 6 specially elected members. From these, some of the members form cabinet. In other words, one may not find his or her way into cabinet unless that individual is a member of parliament. So first, one has to be a member of parliament before one can be a cabinet minister. Cabinet members, therefore, take part in budget debates and approval. Cabinet members, some of them represent constituencies. And also, the backbenchers are having, some of them having constituencies. I've decided to pick some few key strategic oversight institutions in Botswana, which work closely and are linked to parliament. Amongst them, there will be the Ombudsman, there will be the Auditor General, there will be the Botswana Accountancy Oversight Authority. I have already indicated that the ultimate in oversight in this country is Parliament. Section 78 of the Constitution gives Parliament powers to regulate its procedure. And it was in exercise of this section or this authority that Parliament promulgated its own standing orders, which govern the daily routine business of Parliament. Over and above that, we have the National Assembly Powers and Privileges Act, which tells you what the MPs can do, what protects them, and what power and authority the committees may have. Interesting is that Section 9 of that Act gives Parliament the power to call anybody to come and account to it, or any of its committees. It may even issue subpoena to ensure that that person comes. And if that person refuses to come to Parliament, he would obviously see the dark light of the police officers. I have talked about the Auditor General. I've talked about its duty. It has the power to access books, records, reports, and other documents relating to accounts. And obviously, it also works hand in hand with the Public Accounts Committee of Parliament to examine the books. There is the Office of the Ombudsman, which also is given and mandated to deal with complaints, protect the public. It's interesting to note that this applies to government and private entities. So the role of the Ombudsman is not limited only to government, but it's open even to private entities. Section 12 of the same Act talks about the independence of the Office of the Ombudsman. Of note is the Botswana Accountancy Oversight Authority. It's created by Section 3 of the Financial Reporting Act. It exercises oversight on accounting and auditing profession, ultimately reports to the minister, who in turn is accountable to Parliament. I'd like to quickly share with you a lesson that we learned, or a case study which we recently had, linked with this Botswana accountancy and oversight authority. There's one entity in Botswana which used to be a public entity, or which used to be a state enterprise. Because government wanted to privatize, shares were now sold out, and the government still retained some majority shares holding in it. But all the same, it was listed now in the stock market. It happened that there was something which happened, or which the company did, which then caused a parliament committee to want to probe and see what is happening in that company. In terms of the standing orders, particularly standing order 110-2, the committee has power to examine the accounts of any body corporate or government or any state enterprise. And this is the Committee on Statutory Bodies and State Enterprises. In exercise of the powers given to it by Section 9 of the National Assembly Powers and Privileges Act, it called this particular entity to come and account. What happened was that the entity appeared before Parliament and say, you don't have jurisdiction to examine us. In other words, you are not the right authority to call us and try to question us on anything that we do. We are a private company listed in the stock exchange, and you have no interest in dealing with us. An opinion was given to Parliament, particularly to this body, to say, you have a right to call this company. But unfortunately, as we will see later during my presentation, before the committee could now question this company, that particular committee got dissolved and the matter fell into cracks. It would have also been interesting to see how the courts would have dealt with this particular issue. That deprived us of seeing how and what could have been the way this matter got resolved, and particularly what the Court of Appeal, in the event it went to that level, would have answered the legal questions posed. You would see when we get later during my presentation that politics have a role and have a way insofar as oversight is concerned, and the success and achievement of oversight cannot be looked at in abstract. I here want us to look at the linkage between oversight role and representation in Parliament. You'd remember earlier during my presentation, I indicated that Parliament of Botswana is given 3 roles. That is lawmaking, that is oversight, and representation. But can we look at oversight without looking at this other leg, being representation? How do you have oversight and representation linked? You would see that in Parliament, there would be member statements, there would be questions and answers, there will be budget votes, there will be notices of motions, there will be hearings, there will be constituency work, parliamentary committees. These tools facilitate scrutiny of executing actions, scrutiny of executive actions, legislative proposals, and national budget oversight, ensuring government spending aligns with state priorities. Challenges exist. I'm getting to an area where I think some of us may be uncomfortable to deal with it. But I'm being practical. And if anybody would be able to tell me, Advocate Chloe, you are not right. Parliament is a politically charged environment. Maybe I should just say, is there any one of you who would say the parliament where he or she comes from is not politically charged? If so, that will be the most fortunate person in this house. There's what I call political party loyalty. And this has an effect in ensuring that oversight is properly and thoroughly carried out. At times, the politicians or the members of parliament would actually put their political allegiance over what oversight would require them to do. The party caucuses would sometimes whip the members into what the party would want the line to be taught. This may have adverse effect on oversight. The existence of many specialized committees may add immense value to parliamentary work. And this sometimes can be helpful rather than not helpful. I'll skip that because in the interest of time. I have already talked about the impact of politics in oversight and especially in committees in parliament. The composition of parliamentary committees generally reflects that of the parent assembly, with parliamentary political groups represented in proportion to their numerical strength. Special consideration is often given to smaller groups to ensure their representation either as full members or as observers. This inclusive approach aims to provide a balanced platform for diverse political voices. However, the mere presence of opposition members in committees does not guarantee effective parliamentary oversight. Several factors influence the efficacy of committees in fulfilling their oversight role. A party in control often extends its control to committees. Thus, it may control committees. It may also determine committee leadership. For committees to perform oversight role effectively, there must be cooperation between parties represented in parliament. I pick out this as a mechanism which can be used to enhance oversight in parliament. And I'll repeat it for your interest. For committees to perform oversight role effectively, there must be cooperation between parties represented in parliament. You know as much as I do know what will happen if these parties in parliament don't or fail to cooperate. You would sometimes think they are battle or there are battles and at the polling booths, but that's not the case. I have seen it extend to the floor of parliament, as will be seen from a case study that I'm yet to give, if time permits. The majority party in parliament must be open to scrutiny and willing to engage in constructive dialogue with opposition. I here pose an interesting question. Is oversight only when done by opposition? Why do I pose this question? Because there's a misconception that oversight should be done by opposition. And it is only meaningful when it is so done by opposition. In an attempt to answer that question, I have said the answer to it is no. Oversight is a function of parliament. Every member has a fiduciary duty to exercise this function. I am trying to discuss the Botswana system there, but in the interest of time, I'll also just quickly tell you how the complexion of parliament is like. The ruling party has 44 members, including His Excellency, the President. 28 of them are ministers. 14 of them are backbenchers. Opposition has 18. You'd pardon me there because I've written 19. They were 19, but one decided to leave. There are 18. What does it tell you? And it leads me to the next point that I'm making. These numbers of non-cabinet causes a political problem insofar as interpretation of who are the majority insofar as oversight is concerned. I do not wish to attempt to answer that question because it's not a legal question but rather a political one. But your guess is as good as mine, you can see. The others would say we are the majority. The others will say we are the majority. And then it leads to power play. All right? Based on that, I'm going to give you a case study of what happened last year in our parliament. A motion was moved in terms of Standing Order 30 of the Standing Orders of Parliament of Botswana, which gives Parliament the power to suspend any particular standing order for the achievement of whatever they may want to do. The motion was couched in the manner that I've reproduced for you. And during that, the motion was that the House resolves as a matter of urgency to suspend Standing Order 98-1, which talks about the standing committees, and it tells us that those committees, once made, they shall stay for the life of Parliament, which is 5 years. But then Parliament decided to suspend this particular standing order in order to attack the committees, and decided to dissolve all the committees except the Committee of Selection. And it was that within 3 days, the committees must be reconstituted. The motion succeeded. What happened? You can see what it means. What happened thereafter, we started to see limping committees because the other members of the House from the left side of the aisle decided we are not going to participate in those committees. What did that have? What was the effect of that insofar as oversight is concerned? The others felt in our absence as the opposition, oversight cannot be oversight. But this is what I was saying there, that I would not want to try to answer this question. I just leave it for you. Critical lessons learned from this. A comparative yet scrutiny relationship is essential. Effectiveness of legislative oversight is influenced by interplay between the executive and the legislative branches. Cooperative yet scrutinizing relationship is essential. When the executive is transparent and responsive, legislative oversight is more effective. Conversely, when the executive is evasive or dismissive, oversight mechanisms falter. Enhancing legislative oversight and control requires a multifaceted approach. That's your eagle there, hovering over trying to see what's under or beneath it. Those are to me represent the oversight institutions and authorities. They want to try to see what is on the ground in order to represent the people. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope I have not taken too much of your time. May I rest my submissions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Advocate Chloe, for sharing your insights and experiences. I'll move on to our next topic of discussion, which will be on fostering an environment for effective governmental oversight, lessons and experiences.
Muito obrigada mais uma vez.
Once again, thank you
O
very
Dr.
much
Lixo.
to Advocate Lixuen Chorokit from the Parliamentary Council. So I'm not going to repeat the powers of Parliament because you have said everything. So I'm just going to highlight some issues, which is with regard to loyalty to political parties in placing the issues above their functions and their roles. And also for us to do the proper control within the government, we need to have a better coordination between the political parties. And also would like, lastly, what you just mentioned, that scrutinizing relation and also oversight needs to have all those points that you mentioned. And now we're going to give the opportunity to the fifth point, to fostering an environment for effective government oversight and lessons of experience, and it's going to be presented by the Dr. Elizabeth Macharia, the head of the Rule of Law Section Commonwealth Secretariat in London, and we would like kindly to respect the 20 minutes, please, and thank you very much. You're most welcome.
Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Dumelang, and good afternoon. I have the honor of addressing you today on a very engaging and thought-provoking subject. I am Dr. Elizabeth Macharia, and I'm the head of the Rule of Law Section at the Commonwealth Secretariat. I would like to thank Advocate Tiriakosi, the Ombudsman and Human Rights Commissioner for Botswana, for inviting the Commonwealth Secretariat to this pivotal event and for asking me to speak. It is also a pleasure to share the floor with my learned friends with whom I've worked in the past in Botswana, Memma Kaisara, who will speak a little bit later, and of course, Parliamentary Counsel Red Chloe. And also with our guests from South Africa, Professor Vigeni, and from Tanzania, Judge Mwaimu. May I also take this opportunity to convey to you all the greetings of the Commonwealth Secretary General, the Right Honorable Patricia Scotland, who you will know is an untiring advocate for our Commonwealth countries, of which Botswana is a proud member. I have been asked to give some remarks on fostering an environment for effective governmental oversight. The Commonwealth is an intergovernmental organization whose key mandate is to be, for its members, an effective network for cooperation and for promoting development of free and democratic societies. And there lies the answer to the question and actually the topic that I've been asked to speak on. You will agree with me that the development of free and democratic societies guarantees an environment for effective government and for effective governmental oversight. I believe that the Commonwealth Charter captures very beautifully the hallmarks of a free and democratic society, and I would like to examine just 3 of those hallmarks with you this afternoon. The first is that a society should demonstrate respect for human rights. In their charter, Commonwealth countries, of which many of you are citizens, state that they are committed to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and other relevant human rights conventions and international instruments. Our governments are committed to equality and to respect for the protection and promotion of human rights, including the right to development for all without discrimination on any grounds. And this, colleagues and friends, is the foundation of peaceful, just, and stable societies. I was very interested yesterday to learn from the Ombudsman of Botswana that in the past there has been great resistance to the establishment of offices of ombudsmen, and that in the early years of many of your oversight institutions, there was a certain suspicion between your institutions and government. I'm happy to note that this suspicion has abated somewhat into what is hopefully a constructive tension. And in the years to come, I am confident that our oversight institutions will be viewed as partners in maintaining democracy, peaceful and stable government, and hopefully that the relationship will develop to one of a deep mutual respect. I also note that many of our oversight institutions are now taking on a dual role as national human rights commissions, which is very much in keeping with our charter principles of promoting and protecting human rights. The second hallmark of an effective environment for governmental oversight is the respect for the rule of law. And without telling you what you already know, the rule of law in its simplest form is the idea that no one and no institution is above the law, not even our government departments and agencies. The rule of law is indeed a necessary element for an environment of effective governmental oversight. And the Commonwealth believes that the rule of law is an essential protection for the people of the Commonwealth as an assurance of limited and accountable government. The idea that government should be accountable to the people is one that should be celebrated. In fact, in taking any action on behalf of government, government officials should always have this question very much in mind. Is the decision or action I am taking defensible at every stage? Can I account to anyone who asks about this action that I have taken as an officer of government? Are my actions in keeping with the law? In such an environment where accountability is ingrained in the machinery of government, then the role of oversight institutions should become much easier. In fact, what we want to do is foster a culture which supports oversight and not one that is suspicious of oversight. One particular aspect of the rule of law that I should mention is the importance of an independent judiciary. In terms of the Commonwealth Charter, our members should strive for an independent, impartial, honest, and competent judiciary. And I think I echo the statements of some of the presenters who have spoken here today about the importance of a competent public service in all areas. This is integral to upholding the rule of law and to engendering public confidence and dispensing justice. The last hallmark of an environment that supports governmental oversight, to my mind, is democracy. And our Commonwealth Charter is firm in its espousal of the principle of democracy. The Charter recognizes that governments, political parties, and civil society are responsible for upholding and promoting a democratic culture and practices, and that they are accountable to the public in this regard. Yes, government is accountable to the public for upholding and maintaining a democratic culture. Government must be accountable to the people, and you will agree with me that where governments appear to be removed from the daily concerns of citizens, as pointed out by Professor Vigeni, and also as demonstrated in the recent arrest in Kenya, which has brought young people to the streets, then there's often a risk of unrest and the lack of stability in our societies. I believe that our oversight institutions are protectors of human rights. They are guardians of the rule of law and of democracy. They support government in its duty and responsibility to be accountable to its citizens. Accountable governments promote stable societies. Stable societies are essential for social and economic development. I would like to mention very briefly that the Commonwealth Secretariat has a flagship program which we call the Marlborough House Dialogues, where we bring together members of government to come and speak at Marlborough House on various issues. Some of the things we engage on are the Latimer House principles, and these are principles on the separation of powers, which my colleagues have spoken about, that we have 3 arms of government which must all be viewed to be independent and co-equal in their role in governance. We have had the opportunity to hold these Latimer House principle dialogues in 2 of our member countries, in Lesotho and in Barbados in the past year. And in those dialogues, we invite members of the executive, of the legislature, and the judiciary to join us in one room for a conversation about governance. Interestingly, we also have a section where we invite our oversight institutions in these particular countries to join their counterparts in government to discuss any difficulties that they may be having in this very important conversation that should be continuous between the 3 arms of government and obviously with our oversight institutions. I welcome you all, if there is some interest in the Latimer House principles, to speak to me at some point during this conference. In conclusion, colleagues and friends, distinguished ombudspersons, when you sense a certain suspicion or tension when holding government accountable, I trust that you will know that it is a necessary tension which supports greater ideals of peaceful, free, and democratic societies. I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you for your sharp, short, and precise presentation, Dr. Macharia. We shall move on to the next topic. In actual fact, it's the very same topic that Dr. Macharia was presenting on.
Thank you very much. And also to actually, so now we had a fantastic example from a lady, and to actually was direct to the point in a very short time, also highlighting the the oversight of the government and also the responsibility that the government needs to have to its citizens, but also the cooperation that we have within society to respect the environment. Also made reference to the relation of oversight within administration, executive, and also the supervision, and that needs to be effected, and also lesson of the experience and the respects that we have through human rights. So now we would like to go to the presentation, to the last point, and we hope that also is going to be short. That is going to make reference to fostering an environment for effective government oversight, lessons from the Land Tribunal, and it's going to be done by Dr. Sampa Kaisara, Chief Land Tribunal President of the Land Tribunal of Botswana. And kindly, Dr. Sampa Kaisara, you can have the floor, please. So is the Chief Land Tribunal President, Land Tribunal, thank you, of Botswana.
Thank you, the chairperson, and just a correction, I'm not a doctor, unless I'm going to attain this later in life. Good afternoon, delegates, and let me take this opportunity to thank the Office of the Ombudsman, and the Ombudsman, Tuakosi, for the opportunity afforded to us as the Land Tribunal, a very small institution, to also come here to share our experiences. And this will be experiences of quality governance in the quality governance in the landscape. The Land Tribunal is a court of equity and law. It's a court mandated to deal with disputes over land. I believe those who come from Botswana would have heard about the Land Tribunal. And it was established under Chapter 3213 of Laws of Botswana. This came into place in 2014. But you note that it started its operations quite earlier in 1997. By then it was operating under the Tribal Land Act by an order establishing it under that act. As I indicated earlier, the Land Tribunal deals with appeals from the land boards. As you would know, we have 3 categories of land tenures in Botswana. We have tribal land, we have state land, we have freehold. And for purposes of appeal, we only deal with that category of tribal land, which is the biggest chunk of land in Botswana. And above that, we also deal with planning appeals. And this will be appeals coming from the planning authorities. And of late, we have also added another category, which is to deal with compensation matters. And that came in terms of an amendment that was done to the Tribal Land Act in 2022. In a court sitting, the tribunal will be presided over by a president who sits with members. The president is an attorney, and these members are people who are experts in land-related fields, like the likes of the land surveyors, planners, and other related fields. In terms of the hierarchy or the appeal structure, we sit somewhere in between. At the bottom rank, you have those land boards and the planning committees. And also, there's also a provision of hearing appeals from the Minister on Planning Matters, although since 2014, we have never had an appeal coming from that end. we are somewhere, we are at par with the magistrate courts and the customary court of appeal. When we are aggrieved, if aggrieved by a decision of the land tribunal, you appeal to the High Court and ultimately to the Court of Appeal. We will all agree that land is a very important economic resource. It's a finite resource, and it's a resource which, for purposes of Botswana, I think also elsewhere, is also in high demand. And this high demand has resulted in increased or rising conflicts over issues of land ownership, issues of land use. So when this happens, it's very important that you should have in place a structure which will deal with these land disputes. And this is where now you have the land tribunal as one of the mechanisms of resolving land disputes. It's very important to have disputes resolved because this would lead to attainment of secure land titles for citizens. And ultimately, we will then have access to land for our citizens. For purposes of this presentation, we are going to be discussing the good governance perspective in the land tribunal. And for this purpose, we have picked on 5 principles which are relevant to the tribunal within the good governance landscape. And I've listed those principles, which are participation, efficiency, equity, access to information, as well as the rule of law. Starting with the principle of equity, I'll just go into the indicators. And as you see that picture, which I believe most of you are familiar with, there is that distinction between equality and equity. As a court of equity, not only do we deal with issues of fairness, of making sure that there is equality, we go into the principle of equity, which says apply different standards in an effort to have meaningful equality, level the playing field. And this is to ensure that no litigant will come to the land tribunal and be disadvantaged on account of gender, on account of a different income level, on account of the level of education, on account of where that person comes from. And then in the application, in order to get to the land tribunal, currently you only need 10 pula to register your case. You can appear in person, there's no need for you to engage an attorney. The atmosphere is quite a friendly one. You are free to present in Setswana or in English or whatever language you are comfortable with. And in order to promote access, we conduct circuit courts. And this is whereby you now go around the country to where the litigants are, so that they will not have to travel long distances. And when we talk about equity principles, you will note that as we decide cases, not only will we look at the law, we'll also bring into place equitable considerations. I'll just give you an example. For instance, if there's an enforcement, a court order, whereby a person who has occupied land illegally, and that order was supposed to be 3 months to vacate and move from that land, we may apply principles of equity, come up with compassionate considerations, and extend the stay maybe to say you will only leave after 6 months, even after finding that you were at fault or finding for the land board. So equity principles will always be applied at the land tribunal. And then the second principle would be the one of efficiency. And this would be when you deal with litigants, bring into play issues of clarity, simplicity, a time factor, as well as the cost. And then in the application, the 10 pillar I alluded to earlier, the procedures that we apply are very clear. We have a brochure that would explain to you the guidelines of how to approach the tribunal and how to conduct your case. And for simplicity, we also say there's a section which says we should apply less technical procedures unless that is going to lead to miscarriage of justice. And still on the efficiency, the time factor, we set out to complete cases within 9 months of registration. And where we have judgments, we do those judgments within 2 months. And this is just an extract of our process map. And at the bottom there, we have our performance for the past year, which was to say 71% of the judgments were completed within 2 months, and 62% of the cases that came to the tribunal were completed within 9 months. And then the other principle would be information, access to information, availability, and the indicators are availability of accurate information, availability of up-to-date database and openness in procedures. And then coming to the land tribunal, we avail copies of our judgments, our proceedings and orders to the parties on request. We also have booklets or case reports available each year. We submit our judgments to SAFLI, those can be accessed from SAFLI, which is the South African Legal Information Institute. And however, we don't have a computerized case system where we'll be able to access your record electronically, but we are also looking into that. And then getting to the fourth principle, which is participation, you would see that there is participation when litigants have direct access and confidence in what your appeal system. And parties will also be involved and be given a legal, be heard before a final decision is taken. And also, lastly, stakeholder participation and engagement. And applying that to the land tribunal setup, litigants appear before the court and will be given a hearing before a decision is taken. And they, as I said, they can appear with an attorney or they can get any other person to represent them. And on stakeholder engagement, we do public awareness campaigns. We go over the country to conduct meetings, and we communicate through various social media platforms. The rule of law indicators, the rule of law was adequately explained earlier by the previous speaker, but the indicators will be an impartial legal system, an independent judicial framework, freedom from corruptions, as well as checks and balances in place. And then coming to the tribunal setup, the land tribunal exists as an independent department, especially after the rationalization of government ministries. And you know that before the land tribunal existed, the dispute resolution was done by the Minister of Lands. And therefore, with this establishment of the tribunal, it was proposed of coming up with an institution which would be independent to resolve on these disputes. We have an independent panel of 3, which sits to hear the cases. We have corruption prevention committees established and function within our divisions, and parties also have a right of appeal to the High Court if aggrieved by our decisions. And then, in conclusion, we have shared with you the good governance practices in the context of the land tribunal, which is the rule of law, equity, efficiency, participation, and information sharing. And from the assessment we made, we show that there's a high rate of compliance with those that we picked, save for one or two where there's need for improvement. With a short presentation, thank you for your audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma'am Makaisara, for your presentation. We'll now move on to the next stage of our session. In the interest of time, because we are way behind time, lunch began at 1. Time right now, I think, is already 1:30. We will restrict the delegates to maximum of 6 questions. For those who have any questions or comments, those who want to make any comments or raise questions should indicate. Yeah. I think you should check if your mics are working. I will start with the gentleman at the back. You should start by indicating your name and the organization you're coming from, and then you can make a comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mfosi, Legal Advisor, Ministry of Entrepreneurship. A few things. What's important is that there has to be legislation that gives the Ombudsman power. Advocate Turakosi mentioned that he makes recommendations, but those recommendations are not enforceable, as opposed to the Tanzanian system where the Ombudsman has the power to go to court to force the government to adhere to what the Ombudsman says. And I will give a live example that happened with the first Ombudsman, Mr. Maine, who made recommendations that the former Vice President, Ian Khama, when he was Vice President, shouldn't be flying Army aircraft. But that recommendation was ignored by government because it was a mere recommendation. And then I will also give an example from South Africa from the former Public Protector, Advocate Madonsela. Yes, Thuli Madonsela. In respect of her recommendations about Nkandla and the Guptas. In respect of Nkandla, she went to court after the opposition. She became amicus to a filing by the opposition, the EFF and the DA, on enforcement of Jacob Zuma paying back the money. So my point is that the legislation must exist, it must allow, it must give the Ombudsman power, because otherwise, like he said, I mean, it's just a toothless bulldog. So in fact, the political will must exist to give the Ombudsman this power. By way of conclusion, there is a book on Thuli Madonsela's life. It's entitled No Longer Whispering to Power. And in that book, she likens her position to Amakazi. No, not the singer. Amakazi in South African parlance is an advisor to the king. And her job is to take care of the voiceless people. And she talks about the old women and the children and the voiceless people, the powerless people. And in fact, that's the duty of the Ombudsman, to protect the voiceless, to protect the powerless. And there has to be the legislative framework, there must be the political will that will ensure that the Ombudsman has this power. That's all.
Muito obrigada. Eu gostaria que outra pessoa que
I would
queira
like the
vir.
next
Essa primeira
person to
pergunta,
contribute.
acho que é para o provedor de Botsuana.
Issue was for the Ombudsman of Botswana. Any other one that would like to make a comment or present a question? Any other? So if you don't have any other one, can you say your name then? And also designation, maybe your country?
Thank you very much for giving me the floor to put a few questions to the presenters. Maybe I should first introduce myself and then congratulate all the presenters for very good and well-prepared presentations. My name is Tsukutlan Au. I'm from the Senate in the Kingdom of Lesotho. Actually, I had quite a number of questions, but due to time limitation, I'm going to focus only on two questions. The first one actually is addressed to all the presenters. Maybe they can just have a comment on that. What is your take on legislating the percentage of the budget that should be given to oversight bodies in your different countries or in our different countries in order to give them the financial independence and ability to do their oversight functions effectively? Because in a number of presentations, you have raised that issue of financial problems or financial challenges. So my question is based on that. My last question is actually addressed to the presenter from Botswana Parliamentary Council. You did indicate that, and I know that is always the case in all, quite a number of countries, even in Lesotho. You did indicate that for one to be a member of cabinet, which is a member of executive, you have to be the member of the parliament. So my question is, what is your take on that, taking into consideration the Latima House principles of separation of powers? Do you think we are actually trying as much as possible to implement those principles of separation of powers by having somebody who to be a member of legislation and also to be a member of executive? I'm asking that question because it's posing quite a number of problems in my country of late, which was not the case before. Lately, we are having a coalition governments, and this problem is becoming much more evident now that we are having coalition governments, where even members of a ruling party are not appointed in cabinet. They will start unsettling the head of the government in parliament, the prime minister. And even during the time when they are doing, the prime minister is doing the cabinet reshuffle, those who have been taken out of the cabinet start unsettling the government, and because they always prefer to be in the cabinet, to be members of the executive while they are also members of the legislation. Thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to give the floor to another participant. Please raise your hand and identify yourself, please.
moderator. Ubonolo Rahube from Bofepuso, the Federation. I have just two questions. The first one is in relation to the Land Tribunal. May S. Gaisara, you alluded that you do not discriminate according to gender, place of origin, and so forth. On the aspect of place of origin, what happens to those of Botswana of naturalization, whereby probably she is having a case against the land board that he or she is residing? Are they still eligible? The supplementary one is in terms of, you said you use both Setswana and English. Do you, as the Land Tribunal, allow for someone to bring a lawyer during any problem with the land board or the two parties are not agreeing? The second one probably is to our ombudsman. Even though I was not there in the morning, as the ombudsman, officer of the ombudsman, are you thinking along the lines of like South Africa, whereby they have the health ombudsman, whereby he or she can deal with the issues relating to health? I'm asking this because I'm informed that most of the maladministration or cases are from health. Also looking at about 2 to 3 weeks back, there was an issue circulating in the social media in relation to our referral hospital, which is Princess Marina. Would we recommend that we should be having a health ombudsman so that both parties, probably the nurse midwife who was helping the client, can also have a where he or she can relate her ordeal? Because at times when he has to go to the accounting officer, who is in terms of hierarchy, it's she or he is above the nurse and midwife. The last one, which is of interest, is the parliament oversight. Advocate Crowe, you talked about issues of parliamentary committees. I believe we now know that the parliamentary committees are not existent. By not having the committees not sitting, are we not seeing that? Because most of the time, the civil societies, there were times summoned to the different committees to come and to put the issues that they are facing in their respective civil societies. So probably if you can just highlight on to that one. Thank you, moderators.
Muito obrigada.
Thank you very much. I would like to know if there is any other request for the floor. Please be brief or succinct in posing your questions. If there are no further requests for the floor, this is good. No, I do recognize some participant who would like to take the floor. You have the floor. Please say your name.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Muito obrigado.
From Botswana, I represent National Planning Commission. So I'll be asking as a development practitioner. And just what I want to know, I think it goes to all the presenters. How do we ensure that issues of human rights and other related issues that we've discussed today permeate the national planning processes? And also the parts and parcel of the policy pronouncements at national level, because I believe it's very important that these really are addressed and they become parts and parcel of the development process, including the core planning process. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Is there any further request for the floor? If there is no more request for the floor, I'd like to give the floor to the Ombudsman of Botswana to respond to those questions, because there's any more hand raised. So I'd like to give to the Ombudsman, the floor to the Ombudsman of Botswana, so that you can respond to the questions.
Madam Moderator, the first issue was raised by Mr. Mfosi, but I think it was just a mere comment, to use his parlance, on the issue of the recommendations. I think one also wants to look at how the legislation is structured. It's a matter of public policy, essentially, as to whether to actually give the Ombudsman enough powers to enforce. I did say that the powers of enforcement and leading to the assertions of a toothless bulldog are an issue that one would have thought that within the law there would be sufficient measure to ensure that the recommendations that are issued by the Office of the Ombudsman are enforceable. But also, I think when you look at the Ombudsman's Act as it currently stands, you will note that, in fact, non-compliance or non-implementation with the directions or recommendations issued may amount to a criminal offense. So even without saying that there is need to have that particular provision, I think accounting officers and others need to know that they may actually be committing offense by non-compliance with the orders issued. The next question that was raised was whether we shouldn't have a specialty ombuds practices in Botswana. And this is one of the issues that I thought that as we sit here as public policy makers, especially for those in Botswana, we should be listening to the wisdom of the presenters that are going to be making presentations here, so that we carry these particular issues to the powers that be. I am not in a position to direct to Parliament to reorganize the work of the Ombudsman insofar as maybe establishing those, but definitely you did make a very valid point that there has been a lot of, over the years, issues relating to medical malpractice, sometimes not bordering on negligence enough to go to court, so not justiciable, but maybe where there must be some remedy that could be available to any injured party. And in that context, I had a discussion with the NAPA, the National AIDS and Health something agency, on that particular issue, about issues of access to medicines, issues around rights related to denial of medical services, etc., and as to how we need to deal with that. It's a developing scenario that we're currently working on. But as to whether the government sees fit to establish a specialty, in fact, just generally specialty ombuds practices, we will leave it to the powers that be to deal with it. Sitiso from NPC, you will recall that over the years, government has mainstreamed various concerns into the national planning processes. You may recall that over the years, especially in the 90s, during the height of the HIV scourge, the government had directed that HIV be mainstreamed into the national planning process, later issues of environment, etc. So I don't think there is any issue. And as I engage with our stakeholders, we're actually exploring that particular approach to policy and programming in relation to issues of human rights. I thank you.
Thank you, Sr. Ombudsman. E eu gostaria de passar talvez a palavra ao professor Somadon Saikan para responder à questão que foi levantada sobre os recursos financeiros que são escassos ou os orçamentos da maior parte dos países que falou ou o provedor da Tanzânia. Senhor provedor da Tanzânia, agradeço.
I'd rather give the floor to the Ombudsman from Tanzania.
Actually, the question asked about making percentages on the budgets, especially to put a percentage for the ombudsman. I think this is a difficult thing to be done because in Tanzania at one time there was an attempt at least to have a percentage on budget in respect of the three pillars of the state. That has been difficult, and I would tell our fellow who asked this question that is going to be a very difficult one because it will depend on the finances which have been mobilized in a state. And of course, there are so many areas where you will need to have a specific amount or percentage of funds. Now, the problem is how many institutions which are a priority or important would you manage to put percentages in order to make their budgets be probably sufficient? That is a difficult question, and it requires a very big debate in the respective states. I would insist that in Tanzania we attempted to bring a debate about the putting percentages on those main pillars of the state. That failed. Now I believe it is difficult again to go further down, at least to think about having a percentage budget to the ombudsman. But it is a good idea, I know, that it is possible maybe one day when our economies are good, then it is possible to move towards that direction. Thank you.
Muito obrigada, Sr. Provedor da Tanzânia.
Ombudsman from Tanzania. Now I'd like, maybe we should make a recommendation that we should sensitize our governments so that they can increase the budgets for the Ombudsman and Human Rights Commissions because their budgets are very limited. If this is a consensual issue, that we should make such a recommendation. Now I'd like to give the floor to Dr. from the Botswana Parliamentary Council to answer the question on whether someone, for one, to be a member of the executive, they have to be a member of parliament, which has to do with the separation of powers. Some parliamentary commissions have been dissolved. What really happened when those committees, parliamentary committees, were dissolved? You have the floor, the distinguished member from the Botswana Parliamentary Committee, or Council, rather.
Thank you. I have a very difficult question in that I believe that the law is the law, as it exists in the law books. The question challenges me to go beyond my legal reasoning, to say what would I like to see. And my difficulty is that this is a constitutional issue, in that it is the Constitution of Botswana per section 57, which stipulates that Parliament shall be the Speaker, the President, the 57 elected members, and the 6 specially elected members. That is the starting point. What I would like to see and what is prevailing are two different scenarios. Yes, it may appear to be good, but we must also remember that oversight is not absolute, or can never be absolute. The separation of powers, as maybe some would look at it, you may never actually see a system where you would say that's the executive, that's the judiciary, that's the legislature, without any interrelationship between the three. Therefore, it's a difficult issue. It's a political issue which transcends to a legal one, but at the end of the day, I don't think us gathered here can actually be able to try to resolve that issue, because it will then call for those above us to make that decision. And in our system, it may actually even require a referendum. It would want the people to say, yes, we would like you to do that. But at the end of the day, here it is. That is what we are operating with. I know it's easier in other jurisdictions to do that. But I think in my presentation, I indicated and showed that it causes challenges, because others will say we are 44. We returned from the constituencies having been given the mandate by the people, being 44. And then the others would say, no, you are not 44, but you are 14 who can actually go into committees. And we are 18 while you are 14. And then they'll say, no, let's go back to the people, because the people elected 44 of us, or so many of us, and elected so many of you. Therefore, in terms of representation in the committees and in the committee work, we are the majority, and the standing orders say the committees must be a reflection of the political parties, or the complexion of the political parties in the House. So it's a very difficult issue. The other one coming from Re Rahube. I think Re Rahube wants to, he wants to sacrifice me, and I think I should avoid his question and say, look, absolutely, the committees were dissolved, and it was a challenge, of course, reconstituting them. Let's see what will happen when they come back from the elections. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, I would like to give the floor to Mrs. Sampa Kaisara, Chief Land Tribunal President, to see whether gender, when someone is naturalized as a Motswana, when they have a land dispute with a putative owner, if those people have equal treatment, because you talk about equity and equality, and the equity and equality principles. Mrs. Kaisara, the floor is yours to respond to the question.
Não estamos a ouvir.
is muted. Please unmute your microphone, please.
Thank you. The first question was as to whether it will not be discrimination if you are going to not allocate a person who has naturalized, as I understand it. You would excuse me if I did not get the question clearly, but I can speak to the principle. The principle, as explained in this context, is a principle or an indicator coming under equity, which is saying, let's provide equal treatment for all persons. And this is saying, no one person should be disadvantaged because of the place where the person originates from. For instance, if we have a person who originates from area like 700 kilometers away, and in that particular case, there's need to conduct an inspection in local. You don't do that inspection for the purpose, for the reason that where that person originates from is far. So this is saying just give equal opportunities. But however, this is not saying if a person has to be allocated, it does not speak to eligibility for allocation, because that comes in terms of the different policies, either local or national, policies of the land boards or the national laws. So these are just two different aspects. And then on the issue of whether you can bring a lawyer during a hearing, the answer is yes, you can bring a lawyer. You can also bring any other person who can assist you. For instance, if you are dealing with a planning case, you can bring a planner. There's an issue around whether you can bring along a lawyer who is not practicing, but who has qualified as a lawyer. But the answer briefly is you can bring any representative or any person, a family member, to assist you to litigate. Thank you.
Muito obrigada.
Thank you very much. I think Professor Fikeni, the Public Service Commission President, no, I think it's someone else. Please say your name, please indicate your name if you want to take the floor. I think it's Professor Fikeni.
Somado Fikeni, Chairperson, Public Service Commission, South Africa. I do think that there are two questions which I alluded to in my presentation. Let me start with the last one. The gentleman asked if we shouldn't be using our ombuds position so that the human rights permeates in the national planning. I think he is quite spot on, because when I was saying you need a developmental approach rather than a minimalist approach, it simply meant if you see a pattern of certain grievances coming, it's now a macro policy issue. It should be integrated there rather than you just being content with dealing with each case. On the issue of the budget and the resources, indeed, each country has different approach, but generally, I think it is preferred for the entities to have their budgets appropriated directly, rather than via departments who may not understand some of the issues. As I also said, Treasury or Finance understands it better. When you are able to make also a business or a financial case to say, my work has saved you so much, and the cost of not doing my work will be so much more than what you are giving, then in that particular case, it's a language they understand better. But of course, the third one, more sensitive or controversial at times, it's just creating a space which allows for the entities to mobilize resources in the private sector and abroad, of course, being mindful of the balance on the national interest on the issue of autonomy. Thank you very much. Obrigado.
Muito obrigada. Eu acho que só falta responder uma questão, como podemos...
Question left. How can you ensure human rights questions in national planning processes? That was the last question that was posed. Maybe Dr. Elizabeth could. She talked about environment. Ombudsman from Botswana, can you please answer to this question? How can we ensure human rights questions when in national planning processes? Can you please answer to that question?
Buttress really what Professor Figeni has said is that we really need to listen to what ombudspersons are telling us, what information they're gleaning from the ground, from the grassroots about problems that are fomenting, for example, in the human rights sector. And I think the impetus is on government to ask the questions to the Ombudsman's office and to listen to the feedback that they're receiving. But if we have a culture where we consider their work as recommendations and put it aside when it requires something of us, then when time comes for planning, we are unable to engage with our ombudsman and say to them, what can we add to our national agenda? So, as I said, we need a relationship of mutual respect, understanding that each of these bodies has a role to play, and that ombudsmen can flag issues that are fomenting on the ground that require a governmental response and that can be fed into the national planning process. Thank you.
Doutora Elizabeth, thank you, muito obrigada. E com estas respostas,
this set of presentations is over. Thank you so very much for your presentations, because they have allowed us to gain more knowledge, get more experience. For example, in Angola, we don't have a land tribunal. We have a lot of land issues. Thank you very much for making your presentations and for posing those questions. And thank you very much, Ombudsman from Botswana, because you have, for having putting in place this agenda with so many presentations, with assistance from Professor Ayeni. We cannot but thank you for doing that, because these themes are very enriching to us, because they are going to enrich our work as mediators, as ombudsmen, and human rights commissioners. Thank you very much to all. Now I think we can break for lunch. Thank you very much once again.